Last month, at a quiet British port, 9 jet fighters were photographed wrapped in white protective sheets, sitting on flatbed trailers waiting to be loaded into a cargo ship bound for India. They were not new, they were not cutting edge. In fact, they will never fly again. These are 9 decommissioned Seppicat Jaguar aircraft retired from Royal Air Force Service decades ago, being sent to India not to take to the skies but to be taken apart. So here's the question. Why is one of the world's largest air forces, a force that just fought the biggest air battle in a generation, buying scraps? And what does this tell us about the real state of Indian air power right on our doorstep? Welcome to Radar Mode on Pakistan Connect. I'm Qasim. Today we go deep on the Indian Air Force's Seppicat Jaguar, an aircraft that gives me anxiety every time I see a headline about it. It has outlived its retirement by every single one of its original operators, except India, and kept alive through decades of political neglect and procurement failures. And in 2026, still forms the backbone of 6 Indian Air Force strike squadrons. Let us take it apart with some numbers. Before we get into the numbers and the cannibalization and the crashes, we need to understand exactly what the Jaguar was bought to do. Because the mission it was designed for, what the Indian Air Force calls deep penetration strike, is not just a technical specification. It is a strategic concept with direct implications for how India thinks about Pakistan and how Pakistan should think about India. What exactly is deep penetration strike? Deep penetration strike, or DPSA in Indian military, refers to the ability to fly a fast, heavily armed aircraft deep inside enemy territory, well beyond the front lines, past air defenses, past radar coverage, and destroy high-value targets that an enemy considers protected. We're talking about airfields, fuel depots, ammunition dumps, command centers, radars, installations, and bridges, rail junctions, power infrastructure, the list goes on. These targets, if destroyed in the opening hours of a war, can cripple the enemy's ability to fight. In military doctrine, that is called interdiction, cutting off the enemy's ability to sustain combat operations before those operations can even reach full tempo. The specific Indian Air Force requirement for the DPSA role called for an aircraft capable of carrying 2 tons of ordnance at high speed, penetrating approximately 250 nautical miles into enemy territory in a low mode. The low mode refers to the low-level ingress, low-level attack, and low-level egress, and delivering bombs with high accuracy. The Indian Air Force explicitly preferred a twin-engine aircraft for this mission, flying deep into hostile territory at a very low altitude, alone, without fighter escorts. In the face of the enemy air defenses, you want 2 engines. If one is hit or flames out or sucks in a bird at 300 kilometers per hour and 100 meters of altitude, the other engine is what brings you home. A single engine failure on a low strike mission far inside enemy territory and too low to eject safely is not a technical problem. It is, in all practical reasons, a death sentence. This is where it becomes directly relevant to us. India's DPSA requirement was conceived and shaped by the 1971 war. India achieved air superiority over East Pakistan within days, but the war also exposed gaps in India's ability to strike deeply into West Pakistan, to hit the airfields, the fuel infrastructure, the logistic nodes, and command centers that allows Pakistan military machine to function. The deep penetration strike aircraft was India's answer for that particular gap. It was from the beginning an aircraft designed to carry the war to Pakistan's rare areas. The specific requirement, 250 nautical miles of penetration, is not a random number. It is the distance from the Indian border to Lahore, to Rawalpindi, to Islamabad, to Sargodha, the heart of Pakistan's military and strategic infrastructure. That is the threat. An aircraft designed to fly at 900 kilometers per hour, 100 meters off the ground, below radar coverage, to put bombs on Pakistan's most important targets while Pakistan's air defenses are still trying to fight it. In the 1970s, when the requirement was drawn up, that doctrine was coherent and dangerous, which is exactly why we in Pakistan had to take it seriously. The deep penetration strike aircraft evaluation was one of the longest and most contested aircraft competitions in India's military history. India began looking at potential candidates as early as 1966, more than a decade before the first Jaguar landed in India. This formal evaluation involved 5 aircraft across multiple countries, and the selection process took 12 years from the first inquiry to final contract. So who were the contenders? Firstly, the Blackburn Buccaneer, a British heavy twin-engine low-level strike aircraft developed for the Royal Navy and later used by the Royal Air Force. The Dassault Mirage F1 from France, a single-engine French multi-role fighter with good ground attack capabilities and a strong radar suite. It was rejected as it operated as a single engine. The Saab 37 Viggen. The Swedish Viggen was by any measure a remarkable aircraft, capable of operating from dispersed highway strips with advanced avionics for its era. However, the United States refused the sale of a Swedish-developed version of the Pratt & Whitney GTA-D to India, and the Viggen was out. The Soviet Sukhoi S-22. In August 1973, a separate IAF delegation led by Air Marshal Y.V. Malse traveled to the Soviet Union to evaluate the Su-22 swing-wing fighter as a potential candidate and found it met only 45% of the required range. India also attempted to develop its own strike aircraft through the HAL HF-24 Maruth and the proposed HF-73. The Maruth served in the Indian Air Force from 1965 and performed quite well in 1971. But its weak engines and limited avionics prevented further development. HAL later collaborated with Germany's MBB on the HF-73. Export restrictions from the UK and Germany blocked access to the engine, making the project just unviable. As a result, India's indigenous deep penetration strike aircraft ambitions failed, leading it to rely on foreign aircraft acquisitions. And so, after 12 years of evaluation, 5 competing aircraft and 2 Indian indigenous programs that failed, and 1 superpower blocking a sale, India announced the selection of the Seppicat Jaguar on October 6, 1978. The final contract was signed in April 1979. British Prime Minister James Callaghan personally gave India an unequivocal commitment that Britain would never impose sanctions or deny spares. The assurance that made the Jaguar politically acceptable over the Viggen had the engine problem not already killed it. Despite its extensive operational history in low-intensity conflicts, counterinsurgencies and asymmetrical campaigns such as the French interventions in Africa, the 1991 Gulf War, and the Kargil War, the Jaguar was never deployed in a high-intensity battle against a peer adversary with comparable electronic warfare capabilities and advanced modern air defenses. Instead, it excelled primarily in environments where the operating military already held total or near total air superiority, preventing the rugged strike fighter from ever facing a true peer-to-peer aerial conflict. Nigeria, which bought 18 aircraft, retired all of them in 1991. France, which was one of the primary manufacturers, bought about 160 aircraft, retired all of them by 2005. UK, one of the OEMs, inducted about 165 aircraft and all of them were retired around 2007. Ecuador, 12 aircraft, retired all of them by 2006. Oman had bought 24 aircraft of the Seppicat Jaguars, all of them retired by 2014. India's total count of the aircraft manufactured by HAL and imported in flyaway condition totaled to about 205 aircraft, still flying in 2026, the largest operator of this make in history, and the last one still flying. The story of India's Jaguar fleet begins in 1978, like we talked about, after a 12-year evaluation that considered 5 competing aircraft and saw 2 indigenous programs collapse. Despite starting with over 200 airframes, the Indian Air Force fleet has dramatically eroded. By 2015, 65 aircraft had been written off. Nearly a third of the fleet lost in accidents over 36 years. By April 2025, the active fleet stood at approximately 115 aircraft, of which only 83 were considered operationally ready. Across 6 squadrons, each operating between 18 to 20 aircraft, the serviceability rate sits at about 72%, meaning that on a good day, just 70% of the Jaguar fleet is actually operational. Serving personnel put the true mission readiness to 50 to 60% at any given time. With HAL's production line closed since 2008 and the original equipment manufacturer supply chain long defunct, India faced a stark reality. There are no new Jaguars to buy, and no Jaguar engines rolling off the production line, and no manufacturing partner able to provide parts on demand. The only solution available was to find retired Jaguars from other countries and strip them down for components. What followed was a systemic international parts scavenging operation that has now spanned far over a decade. Starting with 35 airframes purchased from France in 2018, which had retired its all Jaguar fleet in July 2005, transferred 31 complete airframes to India at zero cost. In the same year, India also acquired 2 airframes from UK and 2 from Oman, along with engines, spare engines. Total from this around 35 airframes. Between 2024 and 2025, Oman sent 20 plus airframes to India. The Royal Air Force of Oman had retired its last 4 operational Jaguars in August 2014. By late 2024, India had negotiated the acquisition of more than 20 of those retired Omani airframes for cannibalization. In 2024, India formally requested the United Kingdom to transfer 9 decommissioned Royal Air Force Jaguar airframes, along with over 150 categories of spare parts and sub-assemblies. The RAF had retired its last Jaguars in April 2007. The running total from cannibalization operations, approximately 64 donor airframes acquired from France, UK and Oman, on top of the original fleet of 205. Each one of those donor aircraft has been or will be completely dismantled, stripped and consumed, engines, landing gear, hydraulics, avionics, until nothing is left worth taking. And critically, none of this addresses the fundamental problem. It buys time, it does not buy safety. Think of what it looks like in practice. HAL ground crews receive a flatbed truck carrying a white-wrapped RAF Jaguar that last flew in 2006. They spend weeks stripping every usable component. Each part carries its own unknown history. An engine that logged 3,000 or 3,500 hours before RAF retirement, then sat in storage for 18 years, is now installed into a IAF Jaguar that will log another 1,000 hours on top of that. The combined fatigue state of that component is at best estimated. At worst, it is unknown. Why can't India retire the Jaguar? This is the question that sits at the heart of all this argument, and it has a brutally simple answer. India cannot retire the Jaguar because there is nothing to replace it. Not now, possibly not for years. The Indian Air Force is authorized to operate 42 fighter squadrons and over 60 squadrons by modern estimates. As of 2026, it operates 29. And that is a gap of 13 squadrons, roughly 200 to 250 aircraft below the government's own sanctioned strength. And if the Indian Air Force retired its 6 Jaguar squadrons today, that gap would widen to 19 squadrons. As a reference, Pakistan Air Force operates between 24 to 26 active fighter squadrons with 4 to 4.5 generation aircraft, while the Jaguar lags a couple of generations behind, being a second-gen aircraft with upgrades that make it kind of a contender in the third generation category. India's own Air Marshal B.K. Pandey warned explicitly in 2021 that early retirement of the Jaguar fleet would leave the IAF in a precarious state with heavily degraded combat capability. So what are the replacement options, and why have they failed to materialize? HAL Tejas Mark 1A. This is the primary domestic replacement. A light combat aircraft developed over 4 decades by HAL. The Tejas program began in 1983. It's a long time back now. As of 2026, 83 Tejas Mark 1A aircraft types have been ordered, but deliveries are running years behind schedule. The frequency of crashes and fleet grounding casts a dark shadow of doubt on its flight safety record. The Tejas is also a lighter, shorter range aircraft than the Jaguar. It does not directly replace the Jaguar's deep penetration strike role. India signed a government-to-government deal with France in 2016 for 36 Rafale jets. The 36 aircraft are now in service, equipped with 2 squadrons, a follow-on order for 26 Rafale Marine jets for use in the Navy. And in 2024, India agreed to purchase a further 26 Rafale F-4 jets for the Air Force. None of this addresses the 6 squadron worth of gap left by the Jaguar in the strike role. Delivery timelines stretch through the late 2020s. India and France are currently in negotiation for the pricing, technology transfer, and source code sharing for a 114 aircraft Rafale deal, expected to conclude and signed maybe sometime before next year. It's a very slow process, and the amount of red tape they have in India is anyone's guesstimate. AMCA, India's 5th generation stealth fighter program, has been in various stages of design and approval since 2008. HAL was eventually booted from the program and it was given to private players, but the plan is still on tender stages, still on paper. Operational squadron service is not expected before the late 2030s, and that's hoping against hope. We know how the HAL timelines have shifted. They can just shift across decades without any accountability. The AMCA will not rescue the Jaguar squadrons. India's replacement pipeline is real, but real slow. And the Jaguar is being asked to hold the line while every downstream program slips. Retired Air Chief Marshal Anil Tipnis put it plainly to the Indian media. The IAF is being asked to do more with less, and Jaguar's continued operation is not a choice, it is a compulsion. Let us be precise about the Jaguar upgrades, the Darren upgrade program, because it is the centerpiece of India's argument that the Jaguar remains relevant. Now, this deserves both acknowledgement and honest analysis, because the upgrades are real and the limitations are equally real. The Jaguar has been through 3 generations of avionics modernization. Darren 1, introduced from the 1980s onwards, replaced the horribly unreliable NavVAS navigation system with an Indian-developed inertial navigation and weapon aiming suite. Darren 2 added an indigenous electronic warfare suite, including the Tarang Mark II radar warning receiver, improved countermeasures, and enhanced navigation. Both were significant improvements over what the aircraft originally carried. Darren 3 is the most ambitious. Approximately 58 to 61 airframes, those assessed as having structural life extending to the 2025 idea and beyond, are receiving a comprehensive avionics overhaul. An open architecture mission computer, a fully glass cockpit with multifunction displays, a helmet-mounted display system for improved situational awareness, and most significantly, the Israeli ELTA ELM-2052 Active Electronically Scanned Array (AESA) fire control radar. Now, HAL manufactured this under technology transfer from Israel. The weapon suite now includes the ASTRAM short-range air-to-air missile on overwing rails, Rampage long-range strike missiles, Harpoon and Sea Eagle anti-ship missiles, Maverick precision munitions, and DRDO-developed SAAW smart anti-airfield weapon, pave-way laser-guided bombs, and a range of glide and standoff weapons. On paper, this is a meaningfully upgraded aircraft. Super job. HAL has confirmed that the Darren 3 Jaguar will remain in service beyond 2035. Indian air defense commentary has at times described the Darren 3 as giving the Jaguar an air superiority capability. That claim deserves to be examined very carefully because it illustrates precisely the gap between what upgrades can do and what a modern battlefield requires. The Israeli ELM-2052 AESA radar can detect a target at 200 kilometers, but the Jaguar Darren 3 carries no BVR air-to-air missiles capable of engaging a target at that distance. The ASTRAM is a short-range self-defense weapon, effective inside 25 to 50 kilometers. The Astra BVR missile integration is planned but is still in design phases. We'll see when it comes, but right now it is nowhere in sight. In practice, the Jaguar's AESA radar can see a Pakistani F-16 or GF-17 at long distances, but cannot shoot at it. The radar is looking through a keyhole into a room it just cannot enter. The Rampage Jaguar standoff weapon is a genuinely capable long strike weapon with a range of approximately 150 to 250 kilometers depending on launch parameters. But air is the problem. That role does not require the Jaguar specifically. Any aircraft with a hardpoint capable of carrying a Rampage can do the job. The weapon does the work. The aircraft is just the truck, and in this case, the truck is one of the least survivable platforms in the IAF inventory. It has no low observable characteristics, no radar absorbent materials, no internal weapons bays, and radar cross-section management capability that belongs to the 1960s. A modern 4.5 or 5th generation aircraft would prosecute the same standoff strike mission with vastly better survivability. The Darren 3 electronic warfare suite, even with the forthcoming internal jammer pods the IAF is procuring, is designed to manage threats in a 2010 era threat environment. Pakistan's actively modernizing integrated air defense network, combining HQ-9B long-range systems with engagement ranges above 200 kilometers, medium-range HQ-16 and FM-90 systems, and SHORAD layers, is a 2020s network, continuously updated. The Jaguar has no stealth geometry, limited electronic warfare capability against modern AESA-guided missiles, and no ability to stand and fight in contested airspaces. Its only viable posture in any high-intensity conflict with Pakistan or China is to launch from distance and immediately go home. That is not a frontline strike aircraft role. That is, for the lack of a better term, a truck for missiles. An honest assessment from India's own analysts is illuminating. A retired IAF Jaguar pilot writing in the Eurasian Times acknowledged plainly that the Darren 3 Jaguar is less capable in air-to-air combat or using it in contested airspace, which is why they are rarely used in that role. India's own Air Force has accepted the reality. The Jaguar's entire operational posture in Operation Sindoor was built around avoiding Pakistani air defenses entirely, not penetrating them. That tells you everything about how the IAF itself views the Darren 3 Jaguar on the modern battlefield. Every conversation about the Jaguar's limitation eventually arrives at the same place: the Rolls-Royce Turbomeca Adore Mark 811 engine. It is not merely a weakness, it is the fundamental constraint from which almost every other problem flows. And understanding this in detail is essential to understanding why no amount of avionics upgrades can make the Jaguar a competitive platform. The Adore Mark 811 is rated at 8,400 pounds of maximum thrust with afterburner, or 32.5 kilonewtons. That is per engine. The Jaguar has two of them, giving a combined maximum thrust with afterburner of approximately 16,800 pounds. For comparison, a single Pratt & Whitney F100 engine in the F-16C produces over 29,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner, nearly twice the total thrust of a fully loaded Jaguar from a single engine. The payload gap left on the table is real. It is significant and it is gone. The engine derating problem is not just about the engine's original design. It is about what happens to an engine as it ages and what happens when operators can no longer source the parts needed to maintain it at its rated performance. Engine derating, the deliberate or unavoidable reduction of maximum thrust settings, occurs for several reasons on an aging power plant. Of course, you understand that any jet engine working at such levels of performance produces immense amounts of temperature or heat. Hot section components, including turbine blades and combustion chambers, develop material fatigue at high operating temperatures. The result is an engine that is already underpowered by design, progressively producing less and less and less thrust than its nameplate rating. The payload consequence is direct and operational. A Jaguar that is already carrying less than rated thrust due to engine age and thermal derating has less margin available to carry weapons. The aircraft's maximum external load is approximately 4,763 kilograms, which is about 4.7 tons, but that figure is a design specification, not an operational reality on a 40-year-old aircraft in Indian summer heat with derated engines. What the pilot actually gets to carry, factoring in fuel for meaningful combat radius, engine performance in the prevailing temperature, and the weight of the Darren 3 avionics that were added to an airframe designed without them, is measurably less. The Darren 3 avionics upgrades themselves added weight to an airframe that was not designed to carry it, requiring structural modifications to accommodate increased mass. The Adore Mark 811 is also now the subject of an active CBI corruption case against Rolls-Royce plc and HAL officials over the supply of these engines to India. meaning the engine that is throttling the IAF's strike capability is simultaneously the engine at the center of a criminal investigation by India's own Defense Federal Police. The engine that the IAF pilots are flying on today is underpowered, derated with age, maintained through best parts scavenged from museum airframes, and wrapped in a corruption scandal. It is just too old to be fast enough or carry enough weapons to justify its own role. That proves the failure is not just in the platform, but it is a systemic failure. The failure is in the system. There is a reason why military aviation safety regulators are deeply uncomfortable with cannibalization as a maintenance strategy, and it goes beyond the inconvenience of stripped airframes. The problems are structural, cumulative, and in some cases invisible. And for the Jaguar fleet specifically, they interact with each other in ways that make the risk profile worse than any single factor suggests. The first problem is that every time a Jaguar takes off, maneuvers, and lands, its airframe absorbs these microscopic stresses. This accumulates as metal fatigue. Tiny cracks that begin at stress concentration points like fastener holes, wing root joints, and structural hard points, and propagate over time. No avionics or radar upgrades addresses this. Turin 3 gives the Jaguar maybe a better brain, but it does not give it new bones. The second problem: the 9 RAF Jaguars India is now acquiring were decommissioned in 2007, nearly 2 decades ago. These are not young aircraft being sacrificed to keep younger ones alive. These are elderly aircraft being stripped to provide parts for other elderly aircraft. A landing gear strut that logged 4,000 hours with the RAF before retirement then sat in a British storage facility for 18 years, then gets installed on an IAF Jaguar for another 1,000 hours. It carries cumulative fatigue history that the documentation chain between RAF records, UK storage, and Indian maintenance systems cannot reliably track. The third problem: the Jaguar was designed and tested in temperate European conditions. India's operating environment is categorically harsher. High altitude sorties over the Himalayas subject the airframe to pressure differentials that accelerate material degradation. Tropical humidity at bases like Jamnagar causes aluminum corrosion at rates of far above what these aircraft experienced in French or UK service. The fourth problem: cannibalization degrades maintenance quality. The US Government Accountability Office studied military cannibalization practices in depth and found consistently that cannibalized parts increase the probability of premature component failure and require at least twice the maintenance time of a standard repair. Aviation safety regulators call these maintenance-induced accidents, failures caused not by the original design, but by the errors introduced during the maintenance process itself. They are amongst the hardest accident types to predict and prevent because they look identical to standard mechanical failures until a very detailed investigation is conducted. Number 5. The re-engineering option is dead. The Adore Mark 811 engine was acknowledged as underpowered from the first day the first IAF Jaguar entered service. Everybody knew this. India attempted to solve this problem definitively in 2010, issuing a request for proposals to re-engine up to 80 Jaguars with the Honeywell F125 engine, but the program was abandoned in 2019 after projected costs estimated at about $22 million per aircraft, more than half the unit price of a new Tejas, were deemed unjustifiable for airframes already approaching end of their design life. This is what the Jaguar pilots will be flying with until the type is finally retired. Whether that's 2027, 2030, 2040, 2050 depends entirely on how long the replacement aircraft take to arrive and on how many pilots are lost before the decision is forced. By April 2025, the fleet had shrunk to approximately 115 aircraft, with only 83 operationally ready. 3 Jaguars crashed in the first half of 2025 alone. The crash frequency has settled at approximately 2 aircraft per year, a rate that is disproportionate to the fleet's size, and that accounts for an outsized share of the IAF's total accident record. Since 1979, 65 airframes have been written off. According to Colonel Ajay Shukla's landmark analysis, between 1952 and 2021, India lost 1,305 pilots in non-combat accidents across all aircraft types. The Jaguar has contributed its share of that number consistently across its entire service life. In July 2025, a Jaguar trainer took off from Suratgarh Air Force Station on a routine sortie. 30 minutes later, it went down in an agricultural field. Both pilots were killed. Squadron leader Lokendra Singh Sindhu, he was 32 years of age, from Rohtak, who had become a father just 1 month before. His son born on June 10, 2025. And Flight Lieutenant Rishi Raj Singh, 23 years old, from Pali. Witnesses said both pilots steered the jet away from populated areas in the final moments. That decision may have cost them the altitude and time to eject. 2 months later, squadron leader Siddharth Yadav was killed when his Jaguar crashed near Jamnagar during a night training sortie. He too maneuvered the stricken aircraft away from residential areas before ejecting. He did not survive the injuries. An Indian Air Force pilot costs between 15 to 20 crore rupees to train, between 1.5 and 2.5 million US dollars, and takes 6 to 7 years to produce from NDA entry to frontline status. Squadron leader Sindhu had 9 years of accumulated flying. Flight Lieutenant Singh was at the beginning of that journey. These were not green cadets, they were irreplaceable, experienced core of the IAF. There is no spare part that you can cannibalize from one other aircraft to replace what was lost when they died. Retired Air Marshal R.K. Sharma said that even with top-tier pilot training and maintenance, if the aircraft technology is outdated, accidents are bound to happen. After each of these crashes, a court of inquiry is convened. After each inquiry, the conclusion is broadly the same. A combination of possible mechanical failures, possible human error, and no definitive public finding. No one is held accountable. Months later, another Jaguar falls. This is the same system that produced the Bofors scandal, still under a CBI investigation nearly 40 years later, with Swiss documents sitting unopened in government storages. The same system that filed a corruption case against Rolls-Royce over the very Adore engines these pilots were flying. The same system that let HAL slip the Tejas program by 4 decades without consequence. Between 2000 and 2023, over 1,800 corruption cases were recorded across the Indian Armed Forces. Nobody goes to jail, officials retire with their pensions, while pilots pay with their lives. During Operation Sindoor, Jaguars allegedly fired rampage missiles at Sakkar Air Base from distance of 100 to 200 kilometers, functioning as a cruise missile truck like we talked before, never entering Pakistan's air defense envelope. A Jaguar carrying a rampage is a real threat. We acknowledge that. But the fact that the Jaguar's only viable role against Pakistan's HQ-9 and FM-90 layered defense network is to stay 250 kilometers away and fire a standoff weapon raises an obvious question. Couldn't you do that from almost any other aircraft? Yes, and countries that have moved on have done exactly that. The IAF is authorized for 42 squadrons and operates 29. It is flying a 40-year-old airframe assembled from parts scavenged from museum pieces, with engines at the center of the corruption case, upgraded with Israeli electronics that cannot fix the metal underneath. The Tejas replacement started development in 1983, still not delivered. AMCA will not come in any time before 2030. The MRFA contract for 114 additional jets has not been signed. That is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of accumulated institutional failure. In 2026, the Indian Air Force is an Air Force with 13 squadrons short of sanctioned strength, with the frontline strike fleet sustained by graveyard shopping, a procurement system corroded by 4 decades of impunity, and young men being asked to fly aging airframes because the people responsible for replacing the airframes were never held to account. India is shipping 9 dead planes across the ocean to keep its own fleet alive for a few more years. An aircraft conceived as a trainer in 1963, an aircraft whose engines were acknowledged as underpowered before they entered service, an aircraft that has outlived every other operator by almost 2 decades, that has cost dozens of pilots their lives in India. And that continues to fall out of the sky at the rate that produces courts of inquiry and no convictions. Squadron leader Lokendra Singh Sindhu's son was 1 month old when his father died. Flight Lieutenant Rishi Raj was just 23. Squadron leader Siddharth Yadav died steering a broken aircraft away from civilian homes. These men deserved better aircraft. The Jaguar program started in 1979. The Tejas program to replace it started in 1983. In 2026, the plane now has been 45 years in service. Tejas, 1983, is still not fully delivered. And India is on the phone ordering spare parts from museums. That is the bottom line. That is what 9 wrapped up white jets on a flatbed trailer in a British port are really telling us. From Islamabad to London, the world of defense never stops moving. And on radar mode, neither do we. Thank you for watching Radar Mode. Like, subscribe and share if you found this valuable. When does the human cost of flying the aircraft past its service life becomes unacceptable? And who should be held responsible? Drop it in the comments. My name is Qasim. This is Radar Mode on Pakistan Connect. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I'll see you again next week.